The late afternoon sun was the color of rusted copper, bleeding across the pavement in long, melting shadows. It was the kind of light that makes even gas stations look golden, softening the cracks in the concrete and dulling the oil stains into something almost nostalgic. Sarah leaned against the side of our beat-up Honda Civic, the gas nozzle in hand, waiting for the ancient machine to do its thing. It always took a second or two longer than the newer pumps, a quirk we'd come to accept, like the soft wheeze in the AC at home or the missing 5 button on the microwave. I was in the passenger seat, scrolling through my phone, half listening to a podcast about nothing important. It was a moment that didn't matter, a slice of ordinary, so quiet and forgettable that I remember it now in perfect, painful detail. Because within seconds, everything would unravel. The first sign was the sound. That unmistakable hush in the air, like something was holding its breath. Then the car pulled in. Not just any car. A black Cadillac Escalade, gleaming like obsidian, polished so aggressively it reflected the sun like a weapon. It didn't park. It arrived, like a monument being unveiled. She stepped out like she was descending from a pedestal. White tennis dress. Blonde ponytail pulled so tight it looked like it was sculpted. Designer sunglasses that somehow stayed on, even as she scanned the lot with eyes sharp enough to cut steel. She didn't look at me, not at first. Her gaze swept across the station like a security camera. Then it landed on Sarah and held. I didn't know her name yet, but in my head, she was already Karen. Not because of her hair, not because of some meme, because of that look, that silent audit of whether you belonged. Sarah passed the test in every way that mattered, but Karen wasn't grading on kindness. It started small, just a click, then another. Karen was trying to slide her card into the machine, but something wasn't working. Her body shifted from confident to agitated in an instant. She tapped the screen once, then harder. The plastic of her card scraped against the slot with a low, angry sound. Sarah glanced over politely, offered the kind of half-smile strangers give each other when something's not working. Karen didn't smile back. "Excuse me?" Her voice cracked through the air like a golf ball through glass. "Are you just going to stand there? This pump isn't working and I'm in a hurry." Sarah blinked, confused, kind, tired. "Oh, I just paid. It usually takes a second to activate. I don't care what you just did." Karen's voice rose, each word sharper than the last. "Your pump isn't running, and now mine won't start. You're holding up the entire station." Sarah looked around. There were no other cars, just us, just her. "There's no line," Sarah said gently. "It's just me and you." Wrong answer. Karen's expression twisted, like Sarah had insulted her family name. "That's not the point. You're loitering. This is private property. You can't just sit at a pump and wait for things to magically work." "I'm not loitering," Sarah replied, more firmly this time. "Our car's just old. It takes a second, too." Karen was already pulling out her phone. She wasn't bluffing. I pushed open the car door, the creak of cheap plastic against pavement breaking the tension for a split second. "Whoa, hold on. You're calling the cops?" Karen didn't even glance at me. Her eyes were locked on Sarah like a hawk that had already decided its prey was guilty. "For theft," she said calmly, as if that made any kind of sense. "She's obviously using a stolen card. The pump isn't working for a reason. She's trying to scam the system. I've seen this before." I stared at her. For a moment, the absurdity made me want to laugh. But then I looked at Sarah, and that laugh died in my throat. Sarah was shaking. Her hand on the gas nozzle trembled. Her mouth opened, but the words came out like glass, fragile and broken. I just paid. I have the receipt. Why would I steal gas?" Karen didn't care. "Yes, hello," she said into her phone, her voice now syrupy with manufactured panic. "I need to report a theft in progress. Yes, right now. A woman using a fake card? No, she's acting suspicious, very aggressive. She won't even make eye contact." Sarah turned toward me, pale as paper. "She's calling the police," she whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it stop. "It's okay," I said. "She's crazy. No one's going to believe this." But then we heard it. The sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Shrill and urgent, cutting through the summer air like an alarm no one could shut off. Karen's eyes lit up, smug and victorious. Sarah looked at the gas nozzle in her hand like it was a loaded weapon someone had planted on her. And I just stood there, stunned, watching the quiet beauty of an ordinary afternoon split wide open by a stranger's lie. The sirens were already screaming, and the lie had just begun. The squad cars hadn't even stopped moving before Sarah stepped back from the pump, hands slightly raised, receipt crumpled and forgotten in her fist. I watched her shrink, not physically, but in presence. The way people do when they're suddenly cast in the role of a villain in someone else's story. And all they ever wanted to be was invisible. 2 cops stepped out. One was tall and built like a brick wall, the kind of man whose silence says more than any badge. The other had a mustache trimmed so precisely it could have been regulation. They moved with the kind of practiced calm that's meant to diffuse chaos, but all it did was tighten the knot in my chest. Karen. I still didn't know her name, but Karen fit like a glove, walked toward them like she was about to accept an award. "Officers, thank goodness," she said. "She's still here. I was afraid she'd take off before you got here." I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because when you look like me, you learn the hard way that raising your voice doesn't make you heard. It just makes you a target. So I waited, watched, measured everything. Every twitch of the mouth, every flick of the eyes. Officer Ramirez, the one with the mustache, came toward us. Sarah's shoulders were shaking so hard I could see it through the glass of the car. I stepped in front of her, not aggressively, just enough to let him know I was here too. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, voice flat, neutral. "She thinks I stole gas," Sarah whispered. "I didn't. I paid. The receipt is right here." He nodded, took the paper gently, like it might break if handled wrong. He read it. His mouth twitched, not a smile, not quite, but something softened around his eyes. And that's when it hit me. We weren't just being accused of theft. We were being profiled because of our car, because of our clothes, because Sarah's hair wasn't perfectly styled and our Civic had a dent on the driver's door we still hadn't fixed since last winter. Karen saw us and decided we were those people. She wasn't the first. We've lived most of our lives trying not to be noticed. Not because we had anything to hide, but because attention was rarely kind. You grow up in the kind of neighborhood where lawn care is a luxury and vacation means driving to see your aunt 2 towns over. You learn to keep your head down. You learn to blend. I work in a warehouse, drive a forklift. My uniform has my name stitched over my heart, but that doesn't mean people remember it. I'm not bitter about it. It's honest work. I clock in, I clock out. I know how to load a truck with precision most surgeons would admire, but to someone like Karen, I'm just background noise. Sarah works at the public library, children's section. She reads the same 5 books over and over for kids who throw goldfish crackers on the carpet and call her Miss Lady. She comes home smelling like old pages and bubblegum hand sanitizer. She's got a voice that could quiet a room without raising it, and a smile that makes toddlers trust her with secrets they won't even tell their parents. She doesn't do drama. She doesn't raise her voice. That's what scared me the most. The way she stood there, frozen, as this stranger told the police she was a thief. Because Sarah's not the kind of woman who even knows how to defend herself from that kind of attack. It just never occurred to her that she'd need to. And me? I stood beside her, helpless and burning, because I've lived this story before. Maybe not at a gas pump, maybe not with flashing lights, but in every parking lot and boardroom and waiting room where I've ever been silently judged for not wearing the right shoes, driving the right car, or speaking the right kind of English. So no, this wasn't the first time we were looked at like we didn't belong, but it was the first time I wasn't willing to swallow it. Officer Ramirez read the receipt, then passed it to his partner, the second cop, Davis, according to the name tag. Read it, looked at Sarah, looked back at the receipt, and something in his jaw relaxed. He looked almost amused, but he didn't laugh. Not yet. Karen was still talking, loud, dramatic, painting Sarah as some kind of gas station criminal mastermind. "She's a thief," she kept saying, voice rising like a kettle about to scream. But no one was boiling over except her, and for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not fear, not anger, but control. The facts were on our side. We had the receipt. We had the truth, and the cops knew it. They just hadn't said it yet. Sarah was still trembling. I could feel it when I reached for her hand, her fingers twitching in mine, like she was still trying to wake up from a nightmare. "It's okay," I whispered. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe it, not yet. And maybe that's what made me angriest, not the sirens, not the lie, but the fact that someone like Karen could reach into our lives, our quiet, tired, hard-working lives, and make my wife doubt herself, all because of how we looked, what we drove, what she assumed we couldn't afford. It made me wonder how many times she'd done it before. How many people had she scared into silence? How many times had she gotten away with it? Not this time, not with us. Because sometimes all it takes to flip the story is one simple thing: proof. Have you ever been judged just because of how you look? Or what you drive? Yeah, we have too. But this time, we were ready. The thing about seeing someone lie in real time, really lie, is that it never feels loud. It's slow, controlled, like watching someone frost a poisoned cake. That's what it felt like, standing on that cracked gas station pavement as Karen gave her version of the truth to the police. "I saw her insert a stolen card," she said, voice sharp enough to pierce Kevlar. "The pump didn't work at first. That's because the system flagged it. Then suddenly it did. She's watching the security cameras. She won't make eye contact. She's acting nervous. That woman is stealing gas." The words floated through the warm air with surgical precision, like she'd practiced them. Maybe she had. Sarah didn't say a word. She couldn't. Her lips were parted slightly, but her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. Her fingers still clutched the gas nozzle like she didn't know whether to let go or hold tighter. I could see her pupils, wide and dark, trying to track everything at once. The cops, Karen, me, the pump, her hands, the receipt, all of it. She was unraveling and holding herself together at the same time. "She's a criminal," Karen repeated, like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "I want her arrested." Officer Ramirez turned toward Sarah. His face was stone. Officer Davis stood back a few feet, arms crossed. He didn't speak, just watched. Both of them carried that kind of professional unreadability that you pray means fairness, but fear might not. "Ma'am," Ramirez said to Sarah, "can you explain what happened from your perspective?" Her voice cracked before the first word even left her throat. I just pulled in," she said, barely audible. "My car's kind of old. Sometimes the pump doesn't read it right away. But I paid. I have the receipt." Karen scoffed behind him, loud enough for all of us to hear. "Anyone can print a fake receipt. My nephew could do it in Photoshop." I wanted to say something then. I really did. But I stopped myself, because I saw the way Officer Davis looked at me. Not with suspicion, but with that subtle, silent warning only another man understands. "Don't escalate. Let it play." Ramirez held out his hand. "Do you have the receipt?" Sarah nodded. Trembling, she fished it out of her hoodie pocket. The thin strip of paper now wrinkled and curled like it had aged 10 years in her palm. She handed it over like it was a confession, not a defense. The officer took it, read it, slowly, and something shifted. It wasn't a reaction, not yet, but a pause. A flicker of something behind the eyes, the smallest crease at the corner of his mouth. He passed the slip to Davis. I couldn't see what was on it, but I could see them. Davis leaned in, squinted. Then he straightened just slightly. Not in alarm, but in disbelief. He looked over at Sarah, then at Karen, then back at the receipt. Karen, meanwhile, took their silence as validation. "See," she said, practically vibrating with self-righteousness. "You're realizing I'm right." I knew it. I knew it. Davis exhaled once, not a laugh, but the ghost of one. His mustache twitched like he was swallowing something hard. Ramirez turned the paper over once, then held it up to eye level. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you're saying you purchased gas, correct?" Sarah nodded. "Yes." Pump 4 Ramirez pointed at the receipt. "This isn't a gas transaction." Karen tilted her head like she'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "It's not for gas," he repeated. "This is for $87.12 worth of snack food. Chips, candy, and a lottery ticket. There it was, the beat of silence that dropped like a boulder in a pond. I looked at Sarah. She blinked. Wait, what? Ramirez turned the paper so she could see. You paid for snacks and a scratch-off. That's why the pump didn't activate. You never paid for gas. It took a moment for her to register. And then I saw it. The memory flash across her face. She had walked in to prepay. She was tired. She probably hit the wrong button or misspoke. It didn't matter. It was an honest mistake, one any human could make, unless you weren't being treated like a human. Karen's face flushed. That's not possible, she snapped. She was at the pump. I saw her. She's pretending to be confused now. This is all part of the scam. Ramirez didn't respond. He didn't have to. Officer Davis, still looking at the receipt, let out one sharp exhale, then quickly coughed into his fist, but the twitch in his shoulders gave him away. He was laughing. Karen didn't understand why. Not yet. What's funny? She asked, her voice starting to rise. What are you laughing at? Officer Ramirez lifted the receipt again. Ma'am, the reason the pump wasn't working is because you were trying to use her card, not the other way around. You tried to activate it while her card was still logged in from the store purchase. It locked the system. That's why you couldn't get gas. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. That's ridiculous. That's not what happened. I was trying to pay for my gas. Ma'am, Davis said now, his tone clipped and direct. We have the transaction record, the timestamp, and the footage. You didn't pay for anything. You called 911 over a misread receipt and a misunderstanding. You filed a false report. That's a serious offense. Her mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. We are, Ramirez said. You reported a felony. There was no felony. There was barely a mistake. And you did so based entirely on appearances. Sarah let out a sound then. Not a word. More like an exhale she'd been holding for hours. Her entire body sagged. She looked like someone who'd been underwater and finally broken the surface. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd been caught in a wind tunnel and couldn't find her footing. This can't be happening, she muttered. You're taking her side? We're taking the side of the truth, Davis said. And there it was. That beautiful, clean fracture in the story Karen had built. The illusion of authority she'd walked in with was crumbling now, falling away like rusted scaffolding. And Sarah? She was still shaken, still pale. But in her eyes, I saw something else taking root. Anger, not the kind that screams, the kind that waits, the kind that plans. I've heard people say that humiliation is a private thing, that it happens in the dark, behind closed doors, where you have time to process it alone. That's not true. Humiliation can be loud, public, illuminated by gas station floodlights and underscored by the hum of a pump that never gave anyone what they wanted. It can happen while two police officers stifle laughter in front of you, and it can happen when a simple paper receipt, the kind you usually crumple and toss, becomes Exhibit A in your own undoing. Karen stood there, blinking like the lights were too bright. The words hung in the air. You were trying to use her card. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick. Not awkward, but dense like the pressure drop right before a summer storm. And the worst part? No one was saying anything. Not even the cops. Not anymore. They didn't have to. Officer Davis still held the receipt in one hand, but his other had moved to his belt, resting casually like this was over now. Officer Ramirez just stared at Karen, his expression blank. Not out of neutrality, but exhaustion. Like he'd seen this before, too many times. And he was tired of pretending it surprised him. Sarah didn't move. She hadn't spoken in over a minute, and that alone made me nervous. Her silence wasn't stunned anymore. It had shifted, calcified, like her fear had frozen, hardened into something sharper, something focused. Ma'am, Officer Ramirez said, finally breaking the silence, you've made a false report. We're going to issue a citation for misuse of emergency services. You're lucky no one was hurt. Karen didn't react. Not right away. Just blinked again, like the world had stopped making sense. You're punishing me? She said, her voice cracking. No, ma'am, Davis replied. We're documenting your behavior. That line hit harder than anything I could have said. Karen's arms dropped. Her phone dangled from her fingers. She looked around the lot, not at us, not at the officers, but at the world, as if searching for someone to intervene, someone to tell her this wasn't happening, that this wasn't her story now. But it was, and in that moment, the woman who had marched across the pavement with courtroom confidence now stood like a mannequin mid-collapse. Her lips trembled, not with anger, but with fear. Real, pulsing public fear. I should have felt satisfied. I didn't. What I felt was heavier, not justice, not revenge, but something colder, like watching a tower collapse and realizing you were inside it the whole time. Sarah finally exhaled. Her shoulders dropped an inch, just one. But it was the first movement she'd made that wasn't controlled by fear. I stepped closer, not to speak, just to be near her. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't the sirens. They were long gone. It wasn't a voice. It was laughter. Officer Davis let out a short, sharp burst. Just one syllable before clapping a hand over his mouth. Ramirez smirked and shook his head. I turned to look at them. "Sorry," Davis said, not unkindly. "It's just a lottery ticket." "Really?" He held up the receipt again, as if we needed to be reminded. $87.12. Chips, candy, one scratch-off. Karen turned scarlet. Her eyes landed on that number like it had betrayed her personally. "She didn't even buy gas," Ramirez said. "You called 911 on someone buying snacks." Karen opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Whatever script she'd rehearsed didn't include this scene. And that's when the twist clicked in all of our heads. Sarah never bought gas, which meant the card was still active at the pump, which meant Karen had been trying to use Sarah's card, not the other way around. The realization didn't land like a twist. It landed like a trapdoor opening beneath Karen's feet. And down she went. "I was just trying to help," she muttered. "You called the cops," Davis replied flatly. "That's not helping." Her voice got smaller. "I thought she looked, I don't know, off." There it was. Not an apology, just a confession in disguise. I looked at Sarah then, and what I saw shook me more than the police, or the accusation, or even the sirens. Her face was calm now, not blank, not defeated, just still, like something inside her had clicked into place. I didn't recognize that stillness, but I respected it. Officer Ramirez pulled out his citation pad. "We'll need your license, ma'am," he said to Karen. "You can contest the fine in court if you like. We'll submit the footage, the body cam, the receipt." Karen's hands were trembling as she reached for her purse. She fumbled with the zipper like it was a test she hadn't studied for. The confident woman from 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone unraveling in real time, and still. Sarah said nothing. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't speak. Because sometimes silence is louder than shouting. It was louder than the Escalade's engine, which idled in the background like a monument to failed privilege. It was louder than Karen's sniffles, which she tried to hide with a cough. It was louder than the police pen scratching down her information. Sarah didn't need to yell. She'd already won. By the time Officer Ramirez finished writing the citation, Karen had gone completely silent. Not the dramatic kind of silence where you expect a scream to follow. The real kind. The kind that clings to a person like cold sweat. Her posture had changed too. Shoulders curled inward, arms hanging limp like a puppet no one wanted to play with anymore. Ramirez held out the clipboard without looking at her. "Sign here?" She took the pen like it was something foreign. Her hand hovered for a moment before scribbling her name in tight, angry loops. No one said thank you. No one offered sympathy. It was like watching someone fill out their own obituary. Then, from behind the glass doors of the convenience store, another figure appeared. He was wiry, maybe late 50s, in a navy blue shirt with "manager" stitched above the pocket in faded white thread. His name tag said Mr. Chen. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, sharp and tired, carried the weight of 1,000 small-town incidents he never got paid enough to handle. He stepped outside slowly, clipboard in hand, like a man who had waited long enough for his moment. "Officers," he said with a small nod. "Everything okay out here?" Ramirez looked up. "Just finishing up, sir. This woman filed a false report. Accused a customer of theft over a misunderstanding. We've got it all." On tape, Mr. Chen didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his eyes on Karen, and for the first time, I saw recognition flicker across his face. Not surprise, recognition. "Ah," he said quietly. "You." Karen blinked. "What?" He tilted his head slightly. "You were here last month. You threw a fit because the coffee was too hot. Claimed it was a safety hazard, demanded a refund and a written apology. That has nothing to do with this," she snapped. He didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward. He didn't have to. The man had the quiet, terrifying authority of someone who had absolutely nothing left to prove. "Actually, it has everything to do with this," he said. "I've reviewed the cameras. You were the aggressor the moment you stepped out of your car. You made false accusations and you escalated a situation that never should have existed." Karen opened her mouth again, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "You're banned from this property," he said. "Effective immediately. Don't come back." The silence that followed was exquisite, not cinematic, not dramatic, final. I didn't even realize I was holding Sarah's hand until she gently squeezed mine. I looked over. Her face was unreadable, not because she was hiding anything, but because she was still processing. All of it. The police, the false report, the humiliation, the receipt, and the strange, twisted punchline the universe had decided to throw in for good measure. Karen stood there a moment longer, the clipboard still trembling in her hand, her perfect ponytail starting to fray at the edges. Then, without another word, she turned, walked back to her Escalade, got in, and drove away. No screeching tires, no last-minute insults. Just the quiet sound of dignity leaking from a luxury vehicle. Officer Davis turned toward us. "We'll be filing this," he said. "And if you want to press harassment charges, you've got more than enough evidence." Sarah shook her head. "I just want to go home." He nodded. "Understandable." Then Ramirez added, almost as an afterthought, "You folks have a good night. And congrats." "On what?" I asked, confused. He grinned, holding up the receipt one last time before handing it back. "On your taste in snacks. That's a hell of a haul." We didn't laugh, not then, but the seed was planted. As the squad cars pulled out and disappeared into the street, the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet we'd had before all this started. It was thicker now, different, like something had shifted in the air and in us. We got back into the car, both of us moving slow, like people who had just stepped out of a wreck. The Civic groaned in protest as I turned the key. It always did that. Normally, it annoyed me. Tonight, it sounded like home. Neither of us spoke for the first mile. The tension hadn't gone away. It had just settled lower beneath the skin. I looked over at Sarah. She was staring straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, the receipt lying across her thigh like a scar. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded once. Then, as if remembering something, she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small, folded rectangle of cardstock. The lottery ticket. She held it in her palm like it might catch fire if she blinked. I glanced at the total on the receipt. $87.12. The last item clearly printed, 1 scratch-off lotto. $5. Neither of us said anything, because the joke was too big to speak aloud. We'd just been accused of grand theft over snacks, chips, candy, and a single lottery ticket. And somehow, this tiny piece of potential had survived it all. Sarah looked at me. "Should we scratch it?" I smiled, for the first time in what felt like hours. "Not here. Let's get home first." We drove the rest of the way in a silence that wasn't scared or broken. Just full, like the ending of a long, exhausting movie you didn't know how much you needed. When we pulled into our apartment complex, the street lamps flickered overhead like they were blinking in disbelief. I parked, turned off the engine, and leaned back in my seat. Sarah scratched the ticket on the dashboard, using a quarter from the cup holder. I didn't expect anything. Not really. But I watched anyway. One number, then another, and then a third. I felt the breath catch in my throat as her fingers froze. "Babe," she whispered. I leaned in, and there it was. A line of matching numbers, followed by the word that didn't look real, even printed in plain black font. $100,000. The world tilted. I stared at it, unblinking. Then I looked at her. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. Then, finally, she laughed. Not a hysterical laugh, not a bitter one, just soft, stunned joy. I took the ticket from her hands and held it up to the dome light, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't. We weren't. That little scrap of paper wasn't just money. It was proof that karma has a punchline. We didn't go home, not right away. The apartment felt too small for the size of what had just happened. It felt like trying to stuff lightning into a mason jar. We needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere neutral, somewhere the walls didn't remember the sound of sirens or slamming car doors. So, we found a diner, one of those quiet places on the edge of town. All worn leather booths, syrup-stained menus, and coffee that tastes like the same pot's been boiling since '96. The kind of place where nothing dramatic ever happens, until tonight. We sat across from each other, the lottery ticket sitting flat on the table between us. Sarah kept looking at it, then looking away, like it might disappear if she stared too long. I didn't blame her. I kept doing the same thing. The waitress brought us waters and 2 menus we didn't open. Her name tag said Betty, and she didn't ask us anything more than, "Need a minute?" Bless her, Sarah finally spoke. "I still feel sick." "Me too," I admitted. It wasn't about the money, not yet. It wasn't even about Karen anymore. It was the leftover adrenaline, the come down from fear, that weird aftertaste of injustice you don't fully swallow, even when it's technically over. "Do you think she'll get in trouble?" Sarah asked. "Maybe a fine, maybe a warning, but people like her always seem to bounce back." Sarah nodded slowly, then, without taking her eyes off the ticket, said, "That's not good enough." Her voice was steady, flat, but there was something in it I hadn't heard before. Resolve, I leaned in. "What do you mean?" She paused, then looked up at me, really looked at me, and said, "She called the police on me like I was disposable, like she could just delete me from the scene if I didn't move fast enough, like I was in the way of her story. I don't want her to get a fine. I want her to remember this." I stared at her, and then I smiled, not because it was funny, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew exactly what she meant, and a dangerous little idea began to curl its way up from the base of my spine, like smoke from a match that hadn't been struck yet. "What if we thank her?" I said. Sarah blinked. "What?" "I mean it," I said, my voice low. "What if we thanked her? Publicly. No lawsuits, no shouting, no names. Just a simple, loud, undeniable thank you. Right where she has to see it." She tilted her head, intrigued. "Like, what? A Facebook post?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "A billboard." Her eyebrows shot up. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." The words came faster now, the pieces snapping into place before either of us could question it. "We put up a billboard across the street from the gas station," I said, "right where she pulled in. Same angle, same view. We take a photo of this." I tapped the ticket, and under it we print a message, something simple, something perfect. Sarah leaned in. "Like what?" I grinned. "To the woman who called 911 at the pump. Thank you for the good luck. The universe works in mysterious ways." For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she laughed, a quiet, disbelieving laugh that bubbled up like carbonated relief. "That's insane," she whispered. "Yup. And brilliant." "Also yup." We were quiet again, but this time it was different. Not the stunned silence of humiliation, but the kind that comes right before a really good move in chess. A silence full of anticipation, and strategy, and power. "You know she'll see it," Sarah said. "She won't be able to miss it. And you think this won't get us sued? We're not naming her. Not even hinting. It's a general message. Could be anyone." Sarah smiled, wide, wicked, and free. "I love it." That was all I needed. The next morning, we called the lottery. Office first, not because of the billboard, but because we still couldn't fully believe the ticket was real. The process was surprisingly simple. We filled out the forms, presented our IDs. They ran the barcode, confirmed the win. The check would take a few business days to clear. But it was real. The number stared back at us from the confirmation slip like it was daring us to use it well. $100,000. And part of it. A very small part, was going to make a point. That afternoon, we drove to the nearest advertising agency that handled physical media. Not Google ads, not social, billboards. The office looked like it had just stepped out of a commercial. Sleek glass walls, brushed metal desks. A guy in a blazer who didn't blink when we walked in, wearing jeans and a hoodie. His name was Ryan. He greeted us like we were either very rich or very confused. "How can I help?" "We want to buy a billboard," I said. He smiled. "Okay. For a business or personal?" "Personal." He blinked. "Okay. What's the message?" We slid the design across the table, hand-sketched on a napkin from the diner, lottery ticket image. Underneath, bold white letters. "To the woman who called 911 at the pump. Thank you for the good luck. The universe works in mysterious ways." Ryan stared at it for a long moment. Then, "Is this real?" "Oh, it's very real," Sarah said. "And legally, you're not naming her?" "Not a word." He grinned. "That's cold. And kind of beautiful." "We'll take it," I said. "Right across from the Chevron on Elm. That exact lot he typed something on his keyboard. That's a premium location, but yes, we can make that work." We signed the paperwork. Ryan shook our hands with the kind of respect you give to people who walk in quietly and leave a mark. It would take 4 days to print and install the design, 4 days for the paint to dry, for the universe to spin, for justice to tie its laces in silence, 4 days for a thank you note to become a warning disguised as grace. Sarah and I spent those days differently than we'd spent any before, not scared, not angry, focused. Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just smiles from 30 feet in the air and waits to be seen. The billboard went up at exactly 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday. We didn't watch the crew install it. We had already played every frame of it in our heads too many times. But when Ryan texted us, "It's done. You're going to want to see this in person," we didn't hesitate. Sarah didn't even change out of her work clothes. I grabbed my keys and we drove without saying a word. We parked across the street in the lot of a crumbling strip mall, the kind where half the signs are faded and one store always seems to be permanently coming soon. The late afternoon sun burned low over the gas station across the road, casting long shadows onto the concrete. And there, rising above it like a judge looking down from the bench, was our message, the billboard. It was even more beautiful than I imagined. The photo of the lottery ticket was crisp, high-res, and unmistakably real. The winning numbers, the date, the barcode. Above it, in clean serif white text on a jet black background, the message read, "To the woman who called 911 at the pump. Thank you for the good luck. The universe works in mysterious ways. No name, no accusation. Just a thank you note so sharp it could cut through concrete." Sarah stared at it for a long time. Her arms were folded across her chest, but I could see her fingertips twitching. Not with nerves, but with release. This wasn't revenge. This was something quieter, a reclamation. "It's perfect," she said, her voice steady. "It's exactly what I needed." We didn't expect her to come back that soon. Not Karen, but poetic timing doesn't ask permission. It just shows up. We were still parked there, sitting quietly, letting the weight of it all settle, when a black Escalade rolled into the Chevron across the street. We didn't move, just watched. Sarah's hand slid into mine. I gripped it gently. The SUV idled for a moment by pump 4, the exact same one. Then the driver's side door opened. Karen stepped out. She wore the same white tennis dress, hair in the same severe ponytail, same sunglasses, same everything. Like the whole thing had been reset, except now we controlled the story. She looked down at the pump, then up at the screen, and then she looked forward, at the billboard. It hit her all at once. Her whole body froze. Not stiff, but still. Like a deer catching the gleam of headlights, but not yet understanding what they mean. Her chin tilted up slowly. She read the words once, then again. I don't know what she thought at first. Maybe she thought it was coincidence. Maybe she assumed it was about someone else. But then came the third read. That's the one that broke her. Her mouth opened just slightly, not a gasp, not a word. Just a low, silent intake of breath. the kind people take when their chest can't hold the weight of irony. She took a step back and stared. The cars at the other pumps kept moving. The world didn't stop. But for her, I could see it. Time had fractured. The woman who had stood in that parking lot with a phone in her hand and the cops on speed dial now stood beneath 30 feet of karma spelled out in Helvetica. Sarah didn't say anything. She didn't gloat. She just watched. Karen's arms dropped to her sides. Her phone was still in one hand, but limp now, useless. She turned her head slightly, scanning the horizon like she could find someone to explain it to her. Someone to confirm that no, this wasn't about her. But the thing about poetic justice is that when it lands, it doesn't ask for acknowledgement. It just is. A billboard like that, you don't need a name. You know when it's about you. She stared at it for maybe a full minute, then two. The longer she looked, the more her posture caved in. I watched it happen. The unspooling of the spine, the way her shoulders rounded in defeat, the way her eyes dropped as if the letters were now shouting too loudly to look at. It was a slow-motion collapse, not physical, but personal. She walked back to her SUV. No gas, no excuses. She didn't even open the pump door. She just got in and sat there. The Escalade idled for a long time. Then, finally, it pulled away. We didn't follow. We didn't wave. We didn't need to. The billboard did all the talking for us. We sat there for a while longer, watching the sky darken behind it. The lights came on just as the sunset hit, casting a golden halo around the message, like the universe was framing it for maximum effect. Sarah leaned back in her seat. "Do you think she'll try to sue?" I smiled. "For what?" Being thanked, she smirked. "She'll try something. People like her always do. Let her," I said. "She can call whoever she wants. But she can't erase that I pointed to the billboard, to the quiet, to the truth, printed large and high for the whole town to see." "Ever thought about responding to hate?" I said, with poetic irony. Sarah looked at me, then at the billboard, and she whispered, like it was a prayer only karma could hear. "Every day." For the next few days, we didn't hear anything. Not from the gas station, not from the police, not from Karen. But we didn't need to. The billboard spoke louder than anything she could have screamed back. We still drove by it sometimes, not obsessively, just when we had errands near that part of town. It sat there, high and serene, facing the same pump where she'd made the call. Unapologetic, undeniable, timeless, and people noticed. We caught it in their expressions. Passing drivers craning their necks, the way folks slowed down before pulling into the station, curious eyes flicking up toward the message. Some smirked, some laughed. A few even took photos. It was already working. And Karen, she vanished. Not literally. Her Escalade was still around. Spotted once at the country club, once outside a tanning salon. But she no longer returned to the Chevron. That station had become something else now. A symbol. A place where she had lost the script. Where her control had cracked in the spotlight and collapsed under the weight of her own arrogance. Because here's the thing about people like her. They live for control, and when the lie no longer works. When no one believes the story, they're spinning. They retreat. Quietly. Shamefully. Because there's nothing left to weaponize. Sarah and I didn't celebrate. We didn't post about it. We didn't tell anyone we were the ones behind it. We didn't have to. The people who needed to know, knew. One night, about a week after the billboard went up, we got a call from Officer Ramirez. I answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, casual, but focused. "Thought you'd want to know. Everything's been officially filed. The footage, the receipt, the report. It's all closed. Karen won't be pursuing anything. The citation stands. No appeal." I exhaled. "Thanks for letting us know." He paused for a beat. "You know, I've been a cop for over a decade. Seen people try to prove their point in all kinds of ways. Never seen one use a billboard. That was poetic." I didn't say anything. Just smiled to myself. "Oh, and the gas station manager, Mr. Chen, he made copies of the footage. Says he's keeping them for training purposes. Apparently, she's not the first difficult customer he's dealt with. but she's definitely the most memorable. Sarah laughed quietly when I relayed that to her. That laugh, soft and whole, was all I ever wanted to hear again. And now I did. Every day. The money from the ticket was still untouched. We hadn't even made a list yet. No wild purchases, no dream vacations. It was sitting in a new account, waiting. What we had done was fix the car. Not because we wanted to upgrade our life for others to see, but because we deserved a vehicle that didn't cough when it turned on. We bought new tires, replaced the cracked windshield, and Sarah finally let herself dream out loud. Maybe one day I open my own literacy nonprofit, she said, as we pulled out of the shop with our newly tuned Civic. Somewhere that helps kids learn to read, not just from books, but from life. I'd come volunteer, I said, as long as I don't have to read Green Eggs and Ham. She smiled. Deal. We never heard from Karen again, but we did hear about her. Apparently she'd filed a noise complaint against a church bell downtown, demanded that the neighborhood HOA shut down a community barbecue because it violated grill placement guidelines, tried to get a high school teacher fired because her daughter got a B in chemistry. But each time she raised her voice, there was a new response, a pause, a smirk, a quiet glance toward the direction of that gas station billboard. Because in a town like ours, once you've been seen, really seen, there's no unseeing you. No law could have done what that billboard did. No courtroom could have broadcast the truth that widely. No judge could have ordered a punishment that perfect. She wasn't arrested, she wasn't sued, she was revealed. And after that, she became irrelevant. Sarah and I, though, we moved forward. We started taking long walks in the evenings again, something we used to do before stress stole the hours. We started dreaming out loud again about small things, repainting the apartment, trying a new diner, finally getting a passport. The air felt different, lighter, not because the world had changed, but because we had. The weight we'd carried, the fear, the indignity. It didn't disappear, it transformed. It turned into something sharper, something useful. We had faced humiliation, and we hadn't screamed, we hadn't sued, we had simply told the truth on a billboard no one could ignore. And then we held our heads high, quiet, free. We didn't go straight home, not after everything. The apartment, with its stack of unpaid bills and blinking router light, felt too small for what we were carrying now. Not in weight, but in clarity. So we drove. No destination, no plan, just the road and the quiet hum of possibility. Sarah had her feet up on the dash, shoes off, toes dancing in the late golden light. The air smelled like clean upholstery and something new. Not new car smell, but new life smell, the kind that comes after a storm clears and you realize you're still standing. We pay off the debt first, she said. It wasn't a question, it was a decision. The car's already fixed, I added. We could finally take that trip we've talked about. Not far, just somewhere without gas stations. She laughed soft and whole. There were still scars, invisible ones. Sometimes when a black SUV passed us on the freeway, Sarah's body would stiffen. Sometimes I'd still see her fingers twitch at the memory of holding that nozzle too long, too tight. But the pain wasn't in control anymore. We were. We took a left at the next intersection, then another, and just like that, without planning it, we found ourselves facing the billboard one last time. It stood tall against the dusk, backlit now, glowing like a lantern on a hill. The message hadn't faded, neither had its meaning. We got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk together, shoulder to shoulder, looking up. Sarah slipped her arm around my waist. I pulled her closer. For a moment, we didn't speak. Didn't need to. The traffic passed behind us. The streetlights flickered on. Somewhere nearby, a train rumbled low in the distance. The billboard just stood there, still, bright, unapologetic, like the truth it carried. We didn't yell, we didn't sue, we just told the truth, in the brightest font on the highway. Ever had to defend your dignity over something ridiculous? Tell us your story below.